Welcome to Real Clear Politics on Sirius XM's POTUS.
I'm Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief, Real Clear Politics. You're listening to us on Sirius XM Radio. My guest now is Brad Carson, who heads a group called Americans for Responsible Innovation. And boy, that's what we need, responsible innovation in the world of AI. Brad, I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm very skeptical of artificial intelligence itself, although I've been told I'm a Luddite and it's here to stay. But last week, the president introduced his initiative. He's getting the United States in the game in a big way. And I want you to tell me what you were struck by, what you think. He had sort of three pillars in there, what you thought of it, and then we can have a bit of a conversation about it. So what was your reaction?
The U.S. is already big in the game, of course. The frontier AI labs that are doing things like ChatGPT are all based in the United States. We're the world leader in that. And I think everyone in both parties wants to see us maintain that leadership. President Trump issued his AI action plan, which we were waiting for with bated breath. There are some debates about how to regulate AI, how to promote it, questions about export controls. We were all eager to see what the administration might come up with. I think it's fair to say that all sides of the issue, really both sides of the aisle in American politics, people were pleasantly surprised by the idea. They took very seriously the safety concerns about it, words about export controls. And so net, I think groups like ARI, which I run, and others who want it to be used responsibly, were excited by what was put forward.
All right. Those of us not in the space, though, who are looking at it from the sidelines, were struck by a couple of things. One is the president, he said, this should benefit American workers. He made that a priority. But a lot of people, think it's going to lead to widespread displacement. The New York Times has had stories how hard it is, to get these entry level jobs, and they're starting to hit parts of the sector, the information sector, that they never did before. What's your response to that? Can you do both these things at the same time? Embrace this new technology and protect American jobs?
Economists differ on that question, but I think the answer is probably not, right? AI, if it's developed as people think it's going to go, will probably lead to widespread labor displacement. And so, the AI action plan for President Trump does talk about this a bit, talks about retraining and internships and all of that. That might be thin gruel to a lot of unemployed workers, though. And so I think it is a world where we're moving rapidly to a place where a lot of labor is going to be displaced. No political parties grappling with that issue. There aren't a lot of great ideas about it, about how to deal with that. And so that is going to be a massive issue, because I think AI is going to leave a lot of people not just unemployed, but unemployable.
Yeah. Greg Orman, who's an independent political person from Kansas, sometimes right for us. He and I were on this show. He did an interview with us maybe a month ago, and Greg said there are public policy implications here. And afterwards I was thinking, years ago, the labor movement, when it was thought that robots would replace auto workers in Detroit, and when the Japanese had mounted this, what was seen as a threat, and you had robot, more mechanism coming in, is that somebody floated the idea from the UAW that a worker displaced by a robot should have an interest in that robot, a financial interest. And I was wondering if there's a way to do this with AI, if there's a way that people whose jobs are lost can be partial beneficiaries, partial owners. And I don't know how that would work or what Congress could do about it. Do you have any thoughts along those lines?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting idea. I think in a world where few of us find meaningful employment, there's going to have to be a change in how taxation works, right? That no longer taxing labor, which is what we largely do in this country, but taxing owners of capital, which will be like the Sam Altmans, who are trillionaires as a result of this. That's a good idea. People have talked about robot taxes. So businesses might pay more taxes if they're using robots. And I think you give the example of the UAW. You've seen a couple of industries beat back AI and automation. The longshoremen out on the West Coast, right? People try to automate that line of work. Their union beat it. The screenwriters, same thing, very concerned about AI, right? Went on strike, they beat it back. And so maybe one of the answers, honestly, is like a stronger labor movement that keeps automation at bay, because left naked without that, said you can imagine a lot of businesses will have the profit imperative, right, to automate.
You're listening to Brad Carson, who heads Americans for Responsible Innovation. And we're all about responsible innovation here at Real Clear Politics. I'm Carl Cannon, RCP's Washington Bureau Chief. Brad, there was another thing in the president's directive that we talked about briefly on the show, but we didn't have an expert on the show like yourself. And it was this effort to make it ideologically neutral. There have been all these stories about when AI, last year, show you tell the various whatever AI you were using to show a German a Viking warrior, it would be a black woman in dreadlocks. The thing was so politically correct it couldn't really function. Now those were supposedly those kinks were being ironed out, and then it turns out that Elon Musk's AI started spewing Nazi nonsense to the embarrassment of Elon. But how does the government do this? What are the mechanisms to make sure this thing isn't doesn't turn into some woke instrument? The National Education Association, this is the largest teachers union in the United States, put out a directive about teaching the Holocaust this week or last week, and it said 12 million people died in the Holocaust of all different faiths. Didn't mention Jews. Well, that's the kind of crap in, crap out. If these are the people designing AI, how's it? It sounds to me like it's going to be a disaster. The president said he doesn't want this to happen, but how do we prevent that?
It's not an easy thing to do because the AIs are being trained on everything that's available online. So it's read every book that's been digitized. It's read on 4chan and Reddit and, lots of things that are NSFW and, racist. I mean, it's read all of that material, right? It trains itself on that kind of thing. And so a lot of the things you're talking about, like having African-American Vikings or such, right, are attempts by actually the labs on the back end of that training to try to tell it, like, please don't be racist. So, they're trying to use humans to actually mitigate some of the problems that too much training from what they've read on the internet, much of which is kind of bile, and
right.
nasty kind of stuff. And so it's not an easy task to do. I mean, like, just imagine, like, in your field, journalism, what's ideologically neutral mean? What does this actually, how do you operationalize that,
right.
in human work? And then you think, okay, now how do you make an AI do that? Like, it's not an easy task to do at all. It's a laudable task. I think it's a good ambition, but it's not simple to do.
All right, let me ask you a question. I've been wanting to ask somebody who really thinks about these issues. So for the last 100 years, I think iRobot was written like in the 1920s. So literally for 100 years, ethicists, theologians, science fiction writers, screen filmmakers who looked at the future of AI, sort of, they end up in the same place. It's weirdly, they say, okay, the robots can't hurt human beings. Why? Because they're told they can't. That's the prime directive. You can't do that. But the machines are thinking. Skynet, the machines are thinking for themselves. And they've been told to not harm human beings. They take that seriously. But what's the threat to human beings? Well, other human beings. So then the robots say, fine, you can't be trusted. We'll take over. And it's this dystopian future, whether it's the Terminator movies or iRobot or 2001: A Space Odyssey, whatever it is. That makes me think maybe we should have just maybe should have kept this in this magic potion in the genie's bottle. But what do you say to that? I'm talking about the end of the human race here. I don't mean to be melodramatic.
No, I'm tempted by that idea. A lot of times you'll hear people say, both thinkers around AI, but certainly the people who work in it, like, this is inevitable, right? There's nothing you can do about it. Technology is going to be developed.
All right. Well, that's going to do it for us today. Thank you very much, Brad Carson. I appreciate it. That's Brad Carson of American